Hello class, for today we're going to be talking about trigonometric functions. I know that we're in the middle of doing arithmetic sequences and series. However, because of the final that's coming up, and no matter what the math department and the administrators, we have all discussed to have the trigonometric function questions as part of our final exam. Now the reason for that would be this is a build-up to your pre-calc class next year, and no matter what, they want you guys to have a basic knowledge of how to graph trigonometric functions. So for this week and next week, we're all going to be strictly talking about trigonometric functions and the properties. So let's go over some basics as to how this month and the rest of the school year is going to go. Your math final will be on June 2nd. Okay, so please have this on your calendar. June 2nd will be your final exam. Okay, it will be about 3 hours long. I believe it's from 9 to 12. And June 1st, June 3rd, June 4th, they're all your final exam days. ELA, I believe it's science or social studies for one of these 2 days, but all of these 4 days will be your final exam days. Now, our exam is on Tuesday. Until June 5th, these days will be used as makeup days. So our last final work will be on June 2nd, and that will be it. Any missing assignments, any retakes, or whatever that you want to do before we wrap up the year and I finalize the grade, you want to make sure you do that within this time frame. Today is the 14th. Until tomorrow, we are going to just grind out on the trigonometric functions, and I have to just give you a lot of the how to graph the functions and things like that work-wise to do. Whatever that I'm assigning you for today will be due tomorrow, so don't worry about that. Next week, starting on the 17th, 18, 19, 20, oh, I'm sorry, wait, no, it's the 17th, 18th, 19, 20, 21, 22. This week, it's all about trig. We need to do a lot of things with trigonometric functions. I need to teach you a lot about amplitudes, frequency, periods, and there's a lot of things to cover. So this week, you'll be dealing with all of that. Starting on the next week, which will be the Memorial Day week, so the Monday you'll have no school. You'll be starting the school on the 26th, 27th, 28th, 29th. These 4 days, I'm going to use it as a review to prepare you for the final exam that's going to happen next Tuesday. Okay, so let's break this down. Next week will be all about trig. The week after that will be all about reviews. You will expect to have a lot of work for this week, and you will have a test on trigonometric functions. I'm gonna try to do this as fast as I could in a single day, but single week. Most likely, it's not gonna end up happening, but you expect to have work on every single day for this week. For next week. The week after that, for the review, I want to make sure on every single day I touch up on different topics on the final exam, and we'll work on it from there. Okay, if you have any further questions, just please send me an email, and then we'll talk about it afterwards. Okay. Now, there's a lot of things on this slide, but I really just want you to scratch all these bunch of things in the on those corners, and I really want you guys to focus on these points. Your sine and cosine graphs will always be what we call a wave. Okay, you will be always plotting a wave. And to plot a wave, you need to know, all you have to know is that it's going to alternate between mid, min, and max. It's going to alternate amongst those points over and over again. And what I need you to remember is that cosine is always your x-coordinates, and your sine values are always your y values, 0, 1, 0, negative 1. And it's going to cycle over and over and over again. That's what the graph is going to look like. So what we're essentially going to do is we're going to take this information and plot it on this XY scale format. Okay? Now, one thing that I need you to remember is radians. And for those of you who don't know radians means it's another way of saying degrees. It's just the measurement of angles. pi over 2, pi, 3 pi over 2, 2 pi. Now, if you have no idea what they mean, they are all coming from these values here. Pi over 2 is 90, pi is 180, 3 pi over 2 is 270, and 2 pi is 360. I should probably write that down. They are going to cycle over and over again. So here, when they say pi over 2, I want you to think of that as 90 degrees to help you understand what that means. Pi is 180, 3 pi over 2 is 270, and 2 pi is 360 degrees. So 360, as you know, is one full circle, right? One full cycle. Okay? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to try to graph the sine wave. Now, the sine wave was always your y-coordinates. So the y-coordinate at 0 degrees or 0 radians was 0. So I'm going to plot 0 right there. Now at pi over 2, my y value was 1. At pi or 180, it was at, I was at 0, back again. At 270, or 3 pi over 2, was negative 1. And at 2 pi, it was back to 0. So what essentially happens is that it goes up and below, and it goes back to mid. This one uphill and one downhill is what I like to call it. This is called one cycle, or one wave, as I like to call it. Okay, and then the way that it's going to happen on the other end is, I'm sorry, this is cosine. It should say sine. I'm sorry, it should say sine of x, and this should say cosine of x. So a sine wave always starts at 0, 0. Sine wave always starts at 0, 0. That's what I need you to remember. And for the other half, it's going to go like this, like this, like this, and like that. So for every pi over 2 frame, okay, every pi over 2 frame that you move down, you alternate from mid, max, mid, min, mid, max. I mean, this cycle is going to go on and on and on and on and on. That will never change about sine waves. That's what I need you to remember. Okay? For cosine, what you're going to have here is that it's going to follow the x graph. I mean, the x coordinate. So it's going to go from 1 at 0. Then it's going to go to 0 at pi over 2. So at pi over 2, I'm going to go to 0. Then at pi, it's going to be negative 1. Then at 3 pi over 2, it's 0. And you can kind of see the pattern here. And then plot those points accordingly, and then it's going to go like this. 1, 0, negative 1, 0, 1, 0, negative 1, 0. So this will constantly alternate between max, mid, min, mid, max, mid, and it's going to go on and on and on. And it's going to go the same way the other way direction. So the cosine wave always starts at 0, 1, or max. Sine wave always starts at mid. Okay? Now, what I need you to understand from here is one property of sine, cosine, sine, cosine waves is called amplitude. A signal that you get from your Wi-Fi, radio, or your cell phone data always follows a wave. It's a wave. Now, there's an important property in wave that's called an amplitude. It's also on sound waves. It's basically talking about how high the output's going to go, how high the volume is, that you're going to hear it. It's called amplitude. And now what it's going to do is a measurement of the middle line to the max, or the middle line to the min. Vertical distance from top to the midline, or from bottom to the midline. Half the distance from max and mid. So if you half it, it's going to give you one of the values. Now the amplitude is always going to be listed in front of the trig functions. So let's go back to here. It says sine of x, right? It just says sine of x. Now what does that mean? It means that there's a 1 implied here. And that's why your amplitude was always 1. It was always 1. Now what would happen if I were to give you, let's say, something like this? Forget about the negative sign for now. Let's say I give you 2 times sine of x. What do you think that's going to mean? Well, that means that you're going to have an amplitude of amplitude of 2. So before, when sine of x at 0, pi over 2 pi, 3 pi over 2, 2 pi, those unit circle values was 0, 1, 0, negative 1, 0. Now your amplitude will be 2, which means you're just simply going to multiply each of these values by 2's. So 0, 2, 0, negative 2, 0. That is your new wave it's going to be. So if I were to go back to my old graph in which my sine wave looked like this, where my amplitude was 1, my framework, or in other words, where the wave was happening, was right here. But now, if I were to plot these new values in here, it would be at 0, 2, 0, negative 2, and 2. So my new wave will look like that. My amplitude will double. In other words, it will double my framework. So that is what amplitude is going to do. It's going to, from the midline is where it is. From top to the mid, the value is 2. Whereas these guys, from before, from top to mid, was 1. For today, I want you guys to understand and really grasp the concept of graphing and understanding amplitude. And you will have homework due by tomorrow, 12 p.m. Thank you. Have a good day.